They found her outside the NICU, unmoving, soaked through from hours of July rain, not barking, not whining, just watching. Like she was waiting for someone she'd already lost. No collar, no tags, just ribs beneath skin and eyes that followed every bundled infant like a memory she couldn't let go. This story will leave you quiet. It will remind you how grief leaves traces on concrete and how loyalty waits, even when no one's coming back. Like, share, and tell us where in the world you are watching from today. The rain had been falling since just before dawn. That slow, curtain-like kind that doesn't end, only deepens. The kind that stains everything in silence. I remember the first time I saw her. She was coiled so tightly against the hospital wall, you'd think she'd grown from the bricks. Her fur was soaked flat. The tan of it turned almost gray with city dust and rainwater. One of her paws was bloodied, old, cracked, dried and split again while walking. Her ribs pressed against her skin like branches through frost. But it was her eyes that stopped me. They weren't wild. They were watching the doors, not the people. Not the motion, not the sliding glass, but the space beyond them. The sealed corridor of the neonatal unit. I followed her gaze instinctively, scanning every set of eyes behind the glass for the things she must have been waiting for. Nothing. Only machines. Soft crying. Nurses in pale blue shoes. She didn't blink when I passed her. Didn't flinch when someone muttered at her to move. She just shifted slightly when the door opened again, like she thought this time finally they'd let her in. I didn't ask about her right away. I don't think I had the voice for it. I'd been spending too much time in this place on the wrong side of joy. My sister's baby had been born 7 weeks too early, a fragile thing wired up like a science project, and none of us knew if she'd ever breathe on her own. You don't talk much in places like that. You learn to measure time by beeping monitors and the way nurses' eyes glance up when alarms chirp. But on my third morning, there rain still coming down, smell of bleach and stale coffee on everything. I saw her again. Exactly where she'd been. Like she hadn't moved all night. A security guard offered me a half-hearted shrug when I asked. Just showed up 2 days ago, won't leave. Won't eat much either. But she's not hurting anyone, so... He trailed off. Already bored of the conversation, I watched her as my sister came through the doors beside me, bleary-eyed, clutching the crumpled tissue. Her baby had coded again the night before. No one had slept. The doctors had said things like, holding on, and we'll see. I touched her shoulder gently, then turned back to the shepherd, still watching, still waiting. I wondered what she'd lost behind those doors. She didn't look like a stray. Not really. Her coat was patchy in places, but not wild. Her nails are long, but not curled. She'd been cared for once. I could see it in the way she held herself. Not fearful, not aggressive. Just patient, painfully patient. She looked like someone's dog, someone who hadn't come back. I sat with her that evening. Not close, just across the walkway, my back against the sidewall, umbrella between my knees. The rain had slowed to a whisper by then, just a hush across the pavement. She didn't look at me once. Just kept her eyes on the doors. I said nothing. I didn't want to break whatever sacred vigil she was holding, but I watched her chest rise and fall. I watched her paw twitch as a nurse pushed a wheeled bassinet down the corridor inside. And I watched the moment she stood slowly, painfully, as a baby was carried through those doors by a young father with tear-stained cheeks. She took 2 steps forward, sniffed the air, and then lowered herself again. The one. I stayed there until the night shift changed. She stayed longer. I asked a nurse the next day if anyone had reported a missing dog. No posters. No calls. No one had come looking. Still, she came back. Every day. She didn't beg. She didn't bark. She didn't chase anyone. She didn't leave the entrance, except maybe to find water. A few of us, the quieter ones, the long-haul family members, started calling her Echo, because it felt like she was remembering something none of us could see. She wouldn't leave the doors, not yet, not until the story was ready. Don't know when I started calling her mine. Maybe it was the third morning she was still there lying in that same pool of pale gray light beneath the overhang. Silent as ever, eyes half-lidded but never fully asleep. Or maybe it was the way the nurses began nodding at me when I walked past her, like I was the closest thing she had to an advocate. I never touched her, not at first. But I sat near her every day, in those early hours before NICU visitation opened. In those long, unspeakable hours after sunset, when there was nothing left to do but wait and hurt and count machines beeping behind glass. She wasn't just waiting anymore, she was remembering something. I could feel it each day. She shifted her weight just slightly, resting on different sides of her body like she was nursing invisible wounds. She never whimpered, never growled. Her breath came slowly and steadily, labored only when babies cried inside. I began to keep a small notebook in my jacket pocket. A place for the thoughts I couldn't speak aloud in that sterile hallway. July 5th, 6:11 a.m., still here. Wet again. Still watching the glass. She stood up when they brought out the red stroller, then laid back down. Not her child. July 6th, 8:20 a.m. Fed her half of my sandwich. She took it gently. No teeth. Still no collar. Still no one is asking that morning. A janitor came out and grumbled that she'd left a small puddle near the front wheel of a gurney. Damn thing's gonna get kicked if she keeps hanging around, he muttered. I stepped forward without thinking. She's not hurting anything, I said. My voice cracked from lack of sleep. She's just waiting. The man grunted and walked off. But the shepherd's ears flicked once. The tiniest sign she'd heard me. A recognition. I didn't know it then, but that was the first time I'd defended anyone in months. I didn't ask about my sister's baby that day. Some days, it was easier not to. To sit in the waiting room, sipping cooling coffee, watching monitors blink through the frosted window. The baby Ellie had improved. That's what they said. Her oxygen levels were stable, and her fingers curled now, even if they didn't grasp. But when I tried to hold her the day before, she flinched. Her skin was so paper-thin and raw that I felt like a stranger intruding on something too holy to touch. The shepherd never looked away from those doors. She didn't flinch. She didn't shift. But there was a softness in her posture that day, a rounding in the shoulders, as if she could sense that someone inside that building was learning to breathe again. That night, the rain came back heavier, a deep thunder that shook the parking lot lights and turned every sidewalk to slick obsidian. I told myself I wouldn't go back outside, that she'd find shelter somewhere. That stray dog always did, but the thought gnawed at me. Around midnight, I slipped down the side stairwell with a blanket folded under my coat. The security lights buzzed overhead. The exit door groaned as I pushed it open, the wind catching it like breath behind a sob. She was still there, not in her usual spot near the entry, but curled in the small alcove where the staff sometimes smoked between shifts. Her body pressed between two utility boxes, tail wrapped tightly under her nose. She was shivering. I knelt a few feet away and held out the blanket. She didn't move. I won't touch you, I whispered. Just this might help. The sound of the rain was almost too loud for me to hear myself. Her eyes opened, slow and dark. She didn't blink. I laid the blanket on the ground beside her and stepped back, holding my hands low the way you do with injured things that have learned to mistrust the world. Then I sat, just out of reach, letting the rain soak the cuffs of my jeans and the edges of my sleeves. After a while, she moved. Not toward me, never toward me, but into the blanket. She circled once, then again, then settled so lightly it felt like she was afraid of disturbing the memory that clung to the fabric. She slept. Not deeply, but enough. And in that moment, I saw the first piece of her past, not through magic, not through the story, through scars, faint, almost hidden in the folds of her hind leg, a long line of tissue, healed but uneven, the kind left by glass maybe, or something sharper. I didn't ask, but I wrote it down. July 7th, 12:48 a.m. First time she used the blanket. Scar on rear flank. Long. Could have been a car. She still won't come close. Still waiting for someone else. The baby next to Ellie had passed away that morning. I didn't know his name. Just the soft blue balloon that had hung from the incubator 3 days before. Now it is gone. The nurses didn't say anything. But the shift in the room was unmistakable. Echo had stood up that afternoon. Just briefly. Her head turned to the Skiles' corridor. Her ears alert, tail still. I wondered if she could feel it. That absence. That empty dot. She didn't lie back down right away. Instead, she paced in a slow, deliberate circle, nose to the pavement. Muscles stiff. 3 steps forward, pause, 2 steps back. Like she was trying to catch the scent of something that had already left. Then she lay down again. Eyes wide open this time. Watching. I asked the front desk again about a missing shepherd. Still nothing. No microchip, they said. No one had come asking, how long can she stay? I asked. The receptionist shrugged. As long as she doesn't cause trouble, no one's gonna call animal control. That wasn't comfortable. That was a clock ticking. And something in me tightened. That night, I brought her more than just a blanket. 2 boiled eggs, half a grilled chicken sandwich, a dish of water. I set them down quietly and waited. She looked at me, then at the food. She didn't move until I stood and took 3 steps back, but she ate 1 bite. A pause, then another. Slow, as if she wasn't sure she deserved it. I didn't say anything, just waited. Then she stopped. She didn't want to be far from those glass doors. Not yet, but something had shifted. She'd taken 3 steps with me. That was enough, for now. Never meant to bring her inside. It wasn't a plan. Just a moment born of instinct. The kind you act on before your brain catches up and tells you not to. It was just after 4 in the morning. The night nurses were changing shifts. My sister had gone home to shower for the first time in 3 days. Ellie had another episode of shallow breathing, followed by a full minute where no one said anything, and I walked outside because I couldn't breathe either. And Echo was there. Just like always. Curled on the blanket, watching. Only this time she stood when she saw me. Not quickly, not with energy. Just enough to meet me halfway across the lot. Her fur was dappled with dew, paws darkened by wet gravel. Her ears twitched at the low whine of ambulance brakes in the distance. But her body was still alert, but not anxious. She wasn't watching the doors anymore. She was watching me. I held the stairwell door open longer than I should have, and she stepped through, not with hesitation. Not like a dog unsure of new ground, but like she had done it before, like once, a long time ago. She had walked this exact hallway with someone who trusted her. The stairwell was dim. Emergency lighting cast soft orange glows against the concrete, flickering slightly near the second floor landing. Echo moved beside me silent, paws soundless on the linoleum as if trying not to disturb the memories trapped in the walls. Didn't lead her toward the NICU. I wasn't foolish, but I didn't stop her from following me to the quiet end of the floor, to the small waiting area with cracked faux leather chairs and a vending machine that never worked. The hallway curved. There, just slightly. From the edge, you could see the faint glow of the NICU wing ahead. But you were just far enough away that no one bothered to walk this way unless they had nowhere else to be. Echo sat. No command. No leash. Just sat, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. I lowered myself into a chair across from her. My legs ached, though I hadn't realized I'd been standing that long. My fingers trembled slightly, and I laced them together to hide it. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the weight she carried. Not just hunger, not just exposure, but memory. She wasn't lost. She was following something she hadn't found yet. A nurse passed by once. Gave me a glance. No questions. That's how it was in that wing of the hospital. People learned quickly not to interrupt what they didn't understand. I think we both sat there for nearly an hour, her body curled just enough to rest her chin on her paws. My head leaned back against the wall, eyelids heavy. The silence was soft, but not empty. It was full of things we both couldn't name. I didn't ask who she was looking for, and she didn't ask why I kept showing up like I had something left to save. Around 5:30, the hallway stirred. Soft footsteps, the shuffle of slippers. A low, tired voice speaking the name of a child who hadn't opened his eyes yet. I stood. Echo did too, but she didn't move toward the voices. She turned toward the far end of the corridor, toward the shadows behind the vending machine, and sniffed. Ears flattened slightly. Not in fear. Recognition. Then she circled once and sat again. I didn't understand it then, but I wrote it down. Later, July 8th, 6:03 a.m. She doesn't watch the babies anymore. Not the way she did at first. Now she watches me. Like I'm the thing she's waiting for. But I'm not. I know I'm not. That afternoon, Ellie opened her eyes. Not wide. Not long. But enough. Her fingers moved, tiny and pale, curling around the edge of the blanket someone had folded beneath her arms. My sister cried. Quietly. No sobs. Just a steady leak of tears that never stopped. Even after the doctor said the words, improving oxygen retention. I didn't cry. I sat beside the bassinet and whispered things I didn't think she could hear. I told her about the rain. About the dog. About the way Echo had looked at her window the night before, not longing, but something else. As if she knew the child inside was fighting. As if she could feel the lungs struggling to fill. She's waiting for someone, I whispered. And I hope it's not you. Ellie blinked once. Closed her eyes. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was breaking. I felt still. That night, Echo didn't come. I waited outside, twice, checked the alcove near the utility box. Walked the full length of the hospital side lot with a flashlight and a nervous knot forming beneath my ribs. Nothing. Not a paw print. Not a scrap of fur. The blanket was still there. Still damp from the morning rain, but she was gone. I didn't write in my notebook that night. I couldn't. She came back the next morning. Just before dawn. I found her curled by the curb, head resting on the cement like she hadn't moved all night. But I knew she had. There was something different in her scent. A faint trace of ash. Smoke, maybe. Or burned leaves. And something red on her fur. Not blood. Not rust. Paint. I knelt, inching forward. Where did you go? She lifted her head but didn't answer. Her eyes followed the slope of the hospital windows above. Then settled. On me again. She had chosen to leave, and she had chosen to return. That day, I stayed longer, sat with her for nearly an hour before my sister called me in, fed her 2 boiled eggs, and a handful of chicken from a sandwich I barely tasted. She ate. Slowly, carefully. But she didn't take her eyes off the hallway door that led back inside. She wasn't waiting for me anymore. She was waiting for something she couldn't quite reach. Something inside. I wondered, for the first time, if maybe she had been here before. Not during the last week. Not with me. Years ago maybe. With someone else. Someone who had walked those halls, holding a newborn. Someone who had disappeared behind those doors and hadn't come back. Maybe she'd tracked them. And then stayed. Maybe she still believed they were behind the glass. I stood to leave, and she followed, not all the way. Just a few steps, then stopped. She sat there, head high, posture straight, guarding the hospital, like it was the last place that still held the scent of someone she couldn't bear to forget. And as I turned the corner, I looked back just once. She was watching me. But I know now. She was never waiting for me. She was waiting for something I hadn't yet seen. It was only a moment. A small thing. Like the way shadows lean toward warmth at the edge of winter. But But it changed everything. Echo looked at the baby. Really looked. And something in her stilled. The fourth floor had a window, facing west, long, narrow, tucked into the end of a hallway that most people didn't bother walking down. It overlooked the ambulance drop, and if the light hit right, you could see past the gravel service lot into the wild edge of the city. Tall grass, one lonesome oak tree. The kind of view that didn't belong in a place like that. I like to take Ellie there sometimes. Not inside, of course she was still too small, too wired. But when they wheeled her into the quiet nursery bay for open-air therapy, the light would stretch across the glass and hit her skin like something holy. Echo saw her there. Not up close. Not face to face, but something passed between them. It was just before noon. I was standing with my hand on the edge of the window, watching the sun shift along the tile. My sister had gone to speak with the pediatrician. Ellie was swaddled, tiny fists curled against her chest, eyes half-lidded in that peaceful, not quite awake way that babies have when the world is just light and sound and heartbeat. I heard the softest click of nails behind me. I turned. Echo stood in the doorway. Not all the way inside. Not even past the threshold. Just far enough that the light touched her paws. Her ears were down, her tail still. Her breathing is slow, even. I didn't say anything. I barely moved. Ellie shifted slightly, and a soft noise escaped her throat. Not a cry, not a whimper. Just breathe. Echo's ears lifted, one at a time, like satellite dishes tuning to a signal. Only she could hear. And then she stepped forward. One paw. Then another. Two more. Her body never fully entered the room. She kept her weight low, head bowed. Her eyes flicked to me once, maybe, or a memory, then back to Ellie. She tilted her head, and she watched. It wasn't dramatic. There was no bark, no whine, no grand show of emotion, but something passed between them slowly, sacredly, and quietly, like wind through branches that hadn't moved in years. Ellie's foot twitched. Echo stepped back. And for the first time since she had arrived at the hospital, she turned her body not toward the hallway, not toward the doors, but toward the child. She didn't come again for days, not into the building. She remained where she always had pressed against brick, curled in shadow, always watching the sliding glass doors with that quiet, measured stare. But something had shifted. Now when the staff wheeled Ellie's incubator down the corridor, even when she couldn't see them, Echo would rise. Don't rush, not follow, just stand. Ears forward. Body still. Waiting. Not for anyone, for her. I started writing less in the notebook. Not because there was nothing to say, but because of the things I wanted to say. I didn't want to read them later. I wanted them to live in the air between Echo's breath and Ellie's heartbeat. Still, I wrote one line. July 11th. She knows the baby now. That evening, I brought Echo an old towel from my car, something that had once belonged to my sister's dog, long gone now, but still holding a scent only animals recognize. She sniffed it and lay down on it without hesitation. Not because she was tired, because it felt like home. That was the first time. I knelt beside her. Slowly, quietly. She didn't pull away. She didn't lean in, but her eyes found mine, and in them, I saw something that made my chest ache. She'd done this before. Not with me. Not here, but somewhere else. Someone had let her protect something small and fragile and human. Someone had given her this task, this purpose, and she had taken it into her marrow. Even now, when there was no one left to ask it of her, she continued. As if loyalty was something born, not taught. The janitor complained again. She's gonna get someone hurt, he said. Liability. I didn't answer, but I left a note on the break room bulletin board, small, handwritten. The dog by the entrance is not a stray. She's mourning. Someone tore it down an hour later, but Echo was still there. That night, thunder returned. No rain at first, just the sky shaking its voice free. The nurses said the storm might delay one of the emergency transfers. A baby from another hospital needed to be brought in, but the roads were backing up. I sat with Echo beneath the overhang. I could hear the baby across the glass crying softly. Not Ellie, but another. One I didn't know. Echo shifted her weight. Then stood. Not suddenly, like she had to, and before I could stop her, she moved toward the sliding doors. The sensor didn't trigger. She was too low, too slow. I opened it. She passed through. And this time, she didn't stop in the hallway. She moved with purpose, down the corridor, past the waiting room, past the corner where the nurse stations dimmed for overnight shifts. Her head low, her ears still. I followed, not out of control, out of reverence, like I was trailing a procession I didn't belong to, and she stopped. Outside the nursery, not close, not against the glass. Just near, then lay down and didn't move. The nurse on duty saw her. She didn't ask questions, just looked at me once, nodded, and dimmed the overhead lights slightly. Echo didn't react, but I swear I saw her eyes close. For the first time inside. No one else saw it, but I did. And when I looked back at the glass, Echo was already gone. Only the faint trace of her warmth remained, pressed into the tile like a question I couldn't yet answer. But the baby smiled. And somewhere in the hallway, a shepherd's footsteps faded into the dark. Somewhere between breath and silence, a rhythm had formed. Not spoken, not named, but real. Echo had stopped pacing the doors. She no longer glanced at every child passing in a stroller or wheeled crib. She didn't lift her head for the murmured conversations or the crying mothers or the trays of food left untouched in the waiting rooms. But when Ellie was wheeled out once a day for skin exposure and warmth therapy, Echo stood. Every time. It didn't matter who was pushing her or what direction she came from. Echo always knew. She'd rise from wherever she'd settled, a shadow beneath a bench, a still shape behind the trash bins, and she'd watch. Not with hunger, not with curiosity, but with something deeper. Like recognition. The first time they were really close was accidental. The nurse on duty had changed mid-shift. A different staffer took over Ellie's schedule, and she hadn't been briefed about the shepherd. I was sitting in the corner chair beside the far window, pretending to read but mostly watching the rain trail down the glass. The nurse opened the door with one hand and wheeled Ellie out in her portable crib with the other, humming softly. Echo was already waiting in the hallway. She stood slow and tall, and moved into the nurse's path with a grace that startled us both. No bark, no sound, just presence. The nurse froze. Is she? She's okay, I said quickly. She won't hurt her. I stepped forward, reaching for Echo's collarless neck instinctively, then remembered there was nothing to grab. I didn't need to stop her. She didn't move closer. She just sat 3 feet away, close enough for Ellie to see her, close enough for the baby's tiny hand still pale and weak to lift, aimless and open. Echo didn't flinch. Her ears flattened, just slightly, and her eyes softened. The baby cooed, not a cry, not a sound of need, just a quiet, airless noise that felt like a yes. They didn't touch, but something passed between them, a pause, a silence so complete it hummed. Ellie's fingers stayed raised, drifting through air like they'd brushed something only she could feel. Her eyes blinked, once and then closed. The nurse didn't speak again. She just nodded once and rolled the crib into the warm patch of light by the window. Echo remained. Later that night, I found her curled beneath the awning again. Her blanket was half damp. Her fur smelled faintly of salt. I sat beside her, not speaking. She didn't need words. Neither did I, but I wrote in my notebook later, July 13th. She stood guard. Not like a soldier, like a memory. That same evening, I asked my sister if she'd noticed anything, if she could feel what was happening between them, between her daughter and the dog that had become a shadow in our days. She looked at me exhausted, uncertain. I think Ellie smiles more when she hears her. Hears her? I asked. My sister nodded. That dog has a rhythm. In her walk, in her breathing. Ellie turns toward it, like she knows the sound. I didn't say anything, but I remembered the way Echo paced, measured, deliberate, not quite. Even. Like one leg was slower to move, or perhaps still healing from something long ago. She had a limp, slight but consistent. Maybe Ellie had memorized it. Babies learn with their ears first. That's what the doctor said. Rhythm becomes comfortable. And Echo was in rhythm. It became routine. Echo would appear just after shift change, never from the same direction. Sometimes from the alley behind the dumpsters, other times from the front hedge line. Once, I saw her emerge from beneath the staff stairwell door, as though she had keys to places no one had given her. She'd make her slow circuit, check the glass. Wait by the door, and when Ellie was moved even before the wheels began turning, Echo would be there. Walking just far enough behind the nurse to not be in the way, sitting just close enough to matter. One afternoon, while the light poured sideways through the west window, Ellie began to reach again. Her hands still trembled. When they moved, a side effect of the early delivery, they'd said. But they moved, tiny, fisted hands opened slightly as her crib rolled past Echo's position near the end of the hallway. I watched from the other side, holding my breath. Ellie's eyes tracked toward her, not sharply, but with purpose. And Echo? She stood. Just once. No movement forward. No change in posture. Just a simple, noble rise. As if to say, I see you too. They began calling her the hallway ghost. Not out of malice. Not even out of fear. Just acknowledgement that there was something about her you didn't explain. A few of the overnight nurses even started saving scraps of food from their dinners. A bite of chicken, a boiled egg, a few spoonfuls of rice. They left them in a quiet bowl by the third-floor elevator bay. Echo never took it while they watched, only after they walked away, but always after. Ellie had been seen. As if tending to herself came after tending to the child. One night I walked the perimeter of the building alone. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't sit. Couldn't listen to one more whisper about low white blood cell counts or adjusted feeding tubes. I turned the corner near the generator housing and found her there, Echo curled in a spot I'd never seen her use. Not hidden but not visible to passers-by. Her head was down, but her eyes were open, and clutched between her front paws was something pink. I stepped closer. It was a baby sock. Tiny, soiled. The hospital brand is still printed on the side. She didn't growl, didn't guard it, but she didn't let go either. Just stared at me as if to say, I remember. I carry them with me. I didn't ask whose it was. I just nodded. And sat with her until morning. She didn't leave the sock behind. She carried it in her mouth, not like a toy, like a promise. And that day when Ellie reached out again, eyes wide, hands opened, the distance between crib and shepherd felt smaller than ever before. Like something was closing. Like something was healing. And no one, not even the nurses, asked me to explain it. Because some things, even in a place of machines and medicine, aren't meant to be understood. There was no decision. No announcement. No leash, no gesture to invite her. But Echo began to follow me. Not every step. Not like a pet or a companion. Just in the quiet way shadows move when the sun shifts close enough to notice. Far enough not to intrude. And always with purpose. The first time was late, well past visiting hours. The kind of night when sleep doesn't come, but pacing does. The hospital corridors felt hollow. Fluorescent lights flickered in odd places, and vending machines hummed louder than the voices in your head. I stepped outside for air. Echo was already there. She was curled near the hedge line, her back to the building, watching the empty road as if expecting someone long overdue. I didn't call her, but when I turned toward the lot and began walking slowly, aimlessly, I heard the soft tick of her paws behind me. I stopped. So did she. I kept walking. She followed. We didn't go far. Just the perimeter. A slow circle past the back generator fence. the staff entrance, the security guard's booth. I said nothing, but I felt something shift inside me. She wasn't just waiting anymore. She was walking with me. We didn't go far. Just the perimeter, a slow circle past the back generator fence, the staff entrance, the security guard's booth. I said nothing, but I felt something shift inside me. She wasn't just waiting anymore. She was walking with me. I started bringing a second cup of coffee. One for me. One poured into a small bowl I left beside the bench outside, mixed with a splash of cream. She didn't always drink it, but some mornings, the bowl was dry before sunrise. Little things like that became our language. A bowl, a blanket, a folded sock placed near her paws, and always her gaze steady, weighted, honest in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. The baby Ellie was moved to a larger crib. It was a small thing, technically. Standard protocol once a child reaches a certain weight. But to my sister, it was everything. She's out of the glass. She whispered to me, like it was too fragile to speak louder. She's not in the box anymore. That day, when they wheeled her out, the new crib had a soft pink mobile tied to the handle. One of those hand-stitched ones from an Etsy store or church fundraiser. And when Ellie passed Echo in the hallway as had become their quiet ritual, the dog rose. A half-second earlier than usual. Not startled. Aware, like she had been waiting for this milestone. My sister didn't talk much about Echo. She saw her, and we all did. But there was a quiet between them, an unsaid understanding that didn't need to be dissected. She makes me feel like Ellie's being watched, she said once. Even when no one's in the room. And she was right. The nurses started saying it too. I passed the NICU bay overnight, one said. Echo was sitting across the hall, didn't move. Just stared through the glass the whole time. Number one knew how she got in some nights. I stopped asking. Started keeping a second towel in my car. The old blanket had worn thin, damp too often, torn at the edges. The new one was darker, thicker. I laid it near the side entrance one night when the temperature dropped below 50. When I came back the next morning, she had moved it 3 feet closer to the window, closer to Ellie. That was the first time I allowed myself to think something irrational, that she wasn't just watching the baby. She was guarding her. And maybe she had always been guarding someone. Found a scratch behind her left ear that week. A small one, fresh but shallow. Not self-inflicted, not aggressive, maybe a branch, maybe a fence. But the way she flinched when I touched near it, just a tremble, barely perceptible, told me something else. She'd been somewhere she shouldn't have, looking for something. Or someone. I started wondering where she went at night. Not always, but often enough to come back with ash in her fur, or the scent of burnt wood on her coat. Once I saw dried leaves tangled near her shoulder. Was she returning to something? Was there a home she still visited? A grave? A place she hadn't let go of? I didn't follow her, but I wrote it down. July 16th. She searches. She follows. But what happens when she finds it? That morning, Ellie laughed. A real sound. Airy and small, but unmistakable. The nurse had tickled her foot gently while checking vitals. And the noise that escaped my niece's mouth made 3 people stop. What they were doing. It was the kind of moment that feels like summer after a winter. So long you forgot the color of leaves. I looked for Echo. She wasn't near the window, wasn't in the hallway, wasn't by the entry doors. Panic bloomed in my chest. I walked the corridor. The lobby. Outside, the rain had started again, thin, warm, almost invisible. I turned the corner near the generator path and she was there. Not curled up, not hiding, standing, looking up at the side of the building, looking at Ellie's window. I stepped beside her, not speaking. Her head tilted, just slightly. Her eyes blinked once, slow. Then she turned and began walking. I followed. She led me to a nearby lot. One I hadn't noticed before was empty, except for a collapsed metal fence and the half-sunken bones of what might have once been a house. Land had grown wild, vines, dandelions pushing through concrete. She stopped, sniffed. The dirt. Sat. Didn't move, didn't look back. I waited beside her. The air was heavy. There was no plaque, no collar, no proof, just a feeling, a knowing. And when she finally stood again, she left something in the grass behind her, the pink sock. She never carried it again after that. I waited to see what Echo would do. Would she follow the crib? Would she recognize the path? The nurse wheeled Ellie around the bend, and just as they turned past the nurse's desk, Echo appeared. Not from behind. From ahead. She had taken the long hallway, the back route. She knew, and as the baby passed, Echo sat in her usual spot. The same distance. Same rhythm. Same silent vow. Hospitals are full of waiting, even when there's movement machines humming, doors opening, doctors murmuring in low tones. It all feels like stillness, like the world is caught between breaths. Echo understood that. She lived in the in-between, the hours before morning, the moments between a cry and its comfort, the long, quiet corridors where fear lived just outside the glow of the emergency lights. She knew how to wait. But now, for the first time, she was choosing where to wait. Not by the entrance, not by the curb. By Ellie's hallway. She didn't come inside every day. She never pushed past the threshold, or begged to follow when the doors closed, behind the nursery staff. But each time Ellie was moved, even for the briefest treatment or crib shift, Echo was already there. At the bend in the hallway. By the nurse's desk, across from the supply cart, where the staff kept heated blankets. Always near, never in the way, and somehow always first. I asked a nurse once how she knew. She listens, the nurse said simply. Better than most of us. And it was true. Echo had begun to recognize sounds we didn't even notice. The rhythm of wheels over the floor, the soft chime of a vitals monitor resetting, the cadence of Ellie's breathing when she was dreaming. Sometimes she'd stir before Ellie did, and when she did, she wouldn't rise immediately. She'd wait. Watch. Let the moment come to her. I started thinking less about where Echo came from, not because I didn't wonder, but because it no longer seemed to matter. She wasn't a story needing explanation. She was part of this one now. The hospital's chaplain, a gentle man with weathered eyes and coffee-stained teeth, started sitting near Echo some mornings. Never close. Just on the bench near the vending machine, sipping tea from a travel mug and murmuring things she never reacted to. She doesn't listen to prayers, he told me once, chuckling softly. Just the pauses between them. I didn't respond, but I understood what he meant. There was a kind of holiness in her stillness, not sacred in the way churches talk about. Sacred in the way grief is, personal, heavy, full of quiet weight. The kind of sacred that doesn't ask for forgiveness or attention. It just stays. One evening, just after visiting hours ended, I came down the stairwell and found Echo sitting beside something I hadn't seen before. A stuffed elephant, small, pale blue. One of the plush toys from the hospital gift shop. It had been placed carefully on the towel she now used nightly, not tossed, not dropped. She didn't look at it. She just lay beside it like it had always been there. No one claimed it. Number one ever admitted leaving it, but I had a feeling that chaplain had a way of noticing things others didn't. That night, as I sat beside her in the warm spill of a flickering exterior light, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in weeks. Safety. Not relief. Not hope, but a small, silent understanding that somehow something was being held, that even in a place where monitors blink and alarms cry out like ghosts in the walls, someone was watching, someone was staying. Ellie's oxygen monitor dropped again the next morning. Not dangerously, but enough that nurses moved quicker, adjusted wires, checked saturation levels with hushed urgency. My sister was white-knuckled at the bedside, not breathing herself. I stood back, watched, useless, and then I noticed the hallway window, the shadow. Just outside it, Echo, she was pressed near the glass, still and grounded, as if bracing the entire building with her ribs alone. She didn't move, didn't blink, just breathed, deep and slow. And as the nurses steadied Ellie's numbers, so did she. That afternoon, Echo followed me again, down the length of the staff lot, past the gated garbage chute, to the place beyond the parking structure where wildflowers had grown up between broken pavement lines. She walked a few steps ahead, never looking back, then stopped beside an old wooden pallet leaning against a half-toppled fence, and lay down. Sat near her. She tilted her head up toward the clouds, thin and feathered that day, like someone had brushed the sky clean with their fingers. And then she lowered her muzzle onto her paws and sighed. It was the sound of something settling, something beginning to belong. I called her name, then really called it for the first time, Echo. She didn't startle, didn't turn, but her tail brushed the ground once, and I knew she'd heard. That evening, I asked my sister if she remembered the dog they had when we were little, Sasha, the shepherd mix that used to sit beneath our bedroom window during thunderstorms. She smiled faintly. She used to follow me home from school, she said. I'd pretend she was a stray and beg Mom to let me keep her every day. She was never a stray, I reminded her. I know, she said, but I liked pretending I'd found something no one else could see. Her eyes turned toward Ellie's room. She reminds me of her, she added, and I knew she wasn't talking about Sasha anymore. That night, Ellie woke up crying. It was rare. Now, she was stronger, sleeping longer. Feeding is easier, but something had rattled her, a bad dream, maybe. The nurse rocked her gently, whispering nonsense sounds meant to soothe, but the baby kept crying. Soft, but insistent. Don't panic. Not pain, just a sadness she didn't know how to name yet. I turned toward the window. Echo was there, only she wasn't lying down. She was sitting, ears lifted, head tilted. Watching. And then without warning she lowered her head and let out the gentlest, lowest hum I'd ever heard. Not a bark, not a growl, a vibration, like the sound of an old lullaby sung with breath instead of words. Ellie quieted. Instantly. Her hand twitched, reaching for nothing. Her eyes fluttered, and she slept. The first man showed up on a Thursday. He wasn't loud, didn't wear a uniform, no clipboard, no shelter van idling at the curb. He looked like anyone else. Plain windbreaker, scuffed boots, a tired badge hanging from a belt loop. But Echo saw him before I did, and she froze. Had just come out of the third-floor stairwell, coffee in hand, the same path as always. She was already there, in her usual place beside the vending machine, her towel folded neat beneath her ribs. Only this time she didn't stand. She didn't lift her head. She watched, eyes locked not on me but on a man down the corridor, speaking quietly to the charge nurse. I slowed. The nurse pointed down the hallway. Her mouth formed the word dog. The man nodded. And Echo's ears went back. Not fear. Not defiance, something deeper, like she recognized a scent she had buried long ago. He didn't approach right away. Walked past her, casual, like someone doing rounds. He took a lap of the ward, then circled back, hands in pockets, gaze flipping sideways. Animal control? I asked, gently. He nodded like it was nothing. Just following up, he said. Some folks called in. Said a stray's been seen inside the building. She's not hurting anyone, I replied. She's not supposed to be in here. She doesn't come in unless someone lets her. He glanced at Echo. She hadn't moved. She chipped? No, I said. She's not owned. Then technically, she's a stray. He didn't say it like a threat, but it felt like one. Found myself stepping in front of her slightly, just a few inches. Just enough to say, "You'll have to go through me first." He sighed. We're not monsters. I'm not gonna drag her out. But policy's policy. I didn't answer. Behind me, Echo remained still. Only her breathing had changed. Shallow, controlled. The way animals breathe when they remember pain. He left 10 minutes later. Didn't take notes. Didn't argue. Just told the nurse to keep an eye. And disappeared back through the staff entrance. But Echo didn't settle. Not that night. Not the next. The next morning. She wasn't in her usual spot. I walked the perimeter twice. Checked the alcoves. The fire escaped. The back stairwell. Nothing. Just damp concrete. And the sound of distant traffic bleeding through a hazy dawn. When I finally found her nearly an hour later, she was curled beneath a delivery van parked near the maintenance shed. Hidden. Coiled like something preparing for her. Disappointment. It broke something in me. She'd known this moment would come, and she'd made herself small to stay. I sat beside her on the gravel, back against the rear tire, and didn't speak. She shifted slightly, her shoulder brushing my shin, and in that touch I felt it. This was no longer about her. It hadn't been for a long time. This was about Ellie. I wrote one sentence in the notebook that night. July 21st. They'll come for her, and I don't know if I'm brave enough. Ellie's progress had been steady. Not miraculous. Not cinematic. Just the slow, faithful miracle of human fragility learning to survive. Her weight had climbed. Her vitals held. Her fingers curled now with intent, not reflex. But more than that, she felt present. Like she saw us. Like she chose us. Each time Echo passed, Ellie would reach. No more wandering motions. No more accidental stretches. Her eyes tracked Echo. Her hand followed. And Echo? She no longer waited to be seen. She arrived. Sat. Watched. The second man came on a Monday. Different uniforms. Different faces. Same badge. This time he had a scanner. I was in the stairwell when I saw two men, speaking low, pausing outside the nursery wing. Echo wasn't inside that day. She had stayed out near the staff lot since Thursday, watching from beneath the camphor tree near the fence. She didn't approach the doors, but they saw her. One of them pointed. I stepped out. She's not chipped. I said before they could speak, she has no tag. No ID, she's not claimed. She's protected, I replied. They blinked. I didn't mean legally. I meant by us. By Ellie. By whatever thread of loyalty bound her to that glass-paneled hallway. She can't stay here forever. One of them said, why not? I asked. She's done more for that baby than most of us. That's not how the world works. I looked at Echo. She hadn't moved, but she was watching, and I realized, with sudden clarity, she knew they were here for her, and she had stayed anyway. Night. I sat with her long after the lights in the NICU dimmed. The hospital grew still. The only sound was the low hum of machinery behind Brick and the cambridin, far-off cry of some animal I couldn't place. I don't know how to stop them, I whispered. Echo didn't answer. She just pressed her nose to my palm, then lowered her head to my lap. That was the first time she'd touched me like that. Not cautiously. Distantly, but with trust. The next morning, Ellie was moved again, this time to a recovery. When closer to discharge prep. No longer full NICU. Not yet home, but closer. I watched Echo rise as the crib passed. She didn't follow. She led. She walked 5 steps ahead of the nurse, then sat at the end of the hall, tail curled neatly beside her body. When Ellie passed, the baby turned her head more fully than I'd seen before and locked eyes. And then a sound. Not a cry. Not a laugh. A whisper of breath through baby lips. It sounded like peace. And Echo didn't move. She just existed in it. The flyer stayed up for 2 days, taped crookily to the glass of the front entrance, its corners curled by wind and humidity. Most people didn't notice it, but Echo never stopped looking at it. She'd stopped just short of the automatic doors now, sitting quietly in the shadow of the entrance, eyes tilted toward her own photo, like she was reading the end of a story she didn't want to finish. I didn't tear it down. I wanted to. I thought about it every time I passed. But part of me believed it would only bring worse attention, make someone notice what they'd previously ignored. And worse, prove she mattered to someone. Because if you care, you're responsible. And if you're responsible, they can hold you accountable. I asked the nurse at the desk if anyone had claimed her. No calls, she said. Any rescues? I asked, foster options? She hesitated. There's one group, but they're full. They said they can't place unvetted dogs around kids unless they've passed temperament checks. She's with a child every day. I know. That was the hardest part. Everyone knew, and still the rules stood taller than the truth. Ellie was moved again, her first day without wires. The nurses called it a milestone, a weaning. They set off of monitors, off of assisted warmth, off of watching every breath like it might be her last. But for me, it felt like the beginning of a goodbye. She was stronger, which meant she would be going, which meant Echo might be left behind. That morning, I brought Echo the last of the chicken from my lunch tray and a folded cloth that smelled faintly of lavender from the NICU. I placed it near her paws. She sniffed it gently, then rested her chin on it, and stayed that way until sundown, like she was storing the scent for later, like she knew. That night, the chaplain sat beside me again. He hadn't said much in the last few days, just offered nods, the occasional knowing look. But now, as Echo dozed lightly on the far side of the hallway, he leaned forward. Have you ever noticed how she never looks afraid? I nodded. Only when they come for her. But even then, he said, she doesn't panic. She waits. Like she's done this before. I didn't answer because I'd been thinking the same thing, not about fear, about memory. She knew what it meant to be left behind, and she had chosen to stay anyway. Friday came quiet. No sirens, no barking. Just soft rain in the parking lot and low gray skies pressing down like hands on glass. The flyer was gone by morning. I don't know who took it down. It wasn't me. And Echo, for the first time in days, walked right through the sliding doors without hesitation. No one stopped her. Not the security guard, not the desk nurse, not the janitor. She moved like fog. Low, slow, present, and went straight to Ellie's room. The baby was sleeping, tucked in a smaller crib now, wrapped in a blanket with yellow sun stitched across it. Her hand was open. Waiting. And Echo sat exactly where she always had, one body's length away. Not close enough to alarm, not far enough to forget. She didn't blink, didn't fidget. She just breathed, and I watched her chest rise and fall in rhythm with Ellie's. 2 lives. 2 silences. Bound by breath. The man didn't show up until 10:45. Same badge. Same clipboard. Different eyes, colder, more tired. He didn't knock, didn't clear his throat, just walked through the door, pointed at Echo, and said, "She's still here." I stood quickly. She hasn't harmed anyone. That doesn't matter. She's not a stray. No one's claimed her. She's not alone, I said, sharper than I meant to. He paused, looked between me, the dog, and the sleeping baby. And then back at his clipboard. Either someone takes responsibility, he said, or she goes with us. Echo didn't move. She didn't even lift her head. She knew, and I think at that moment so did I. I stepped forward, hands shaking, voice quiet. "I'll sign." He looked up. "Excuse me? I'll claim her. I'll take responsibility." His pen hovered. "You're aware this comes with liability?" "Yes, you're aware we don't offer exceptions for animals in medical facilities. She won't be staying," I said, cutting him off gently. "But until the child goes home, she stays near." He hesitated, glanced at Echo again, the way she hadn't moved, the way the baby's tiny fingers had curled inward like they felt her presence. He sighed. And handed me the form. I wrote slowly. Deliberately. Name: Echo breed, German Shepherd, unknown mix, owner, my name. It felt strange to put it on paper. She wasn't mine, not in any traditional sense. But in that moment she was ours. He left without another word. And Echo? She stood. Stretched. Walked to the side of Ellie's crib. And lay down again. No fear. No worries. Just presence. As if she'd known I'd come around eventually. I didn't tell my sister until that evening. She didn't yell. Didn't panic. She just looked at me for a long time, then nodded once. She chose you. No, I said quietly. She chose her. I just finally listened. That night, I let Echo ride home with me. She hesitated at the car door. Not fear, just unfamiliarity. Then with a small grunt, climbed in and lay across the back seat. Her head rested against the window. She didn't sleep. She watched the road, watched the world, watched for something I couldn't see, I think. She always will. Ellie came home on a Wednesday, not with balloons or streamers, not with laughter echoing down the halls. Just a quiet ride in the back of my sister's car, the faint rustling of her breathing blanket, and a single duffel of bottles and instructions. No grand welcome. No dramatic sigh of relief. Just arrived. After so many weeks of not knowing if we'd ever see this moment, it almost felt too small. But Echo knew. She was already waiting by the front window, head resting on her crossed paws, eyes trained on the driveway like she could feel the weight of the child. Returning home, she didn't bark, didn't wag, didn't move until the door opened. And then slowly, reverently she stood and walked forward to meet her. The crib had been set up days earlier. Same as the hospital. Same colors. Same tiny stitched suns on the side of the blanket. Ellie was placed in it with careful hands. Her body so much stronger now, but still impossibly small. She didn't cry. She looked around wide-eyed, blinking, slow like she was seeing a version of the world she'd only dreamed of in pieces. And then she turned her head toward the floor, toward Echo. The dog lay down beside the crib like she had always belonged there. No command. No coaxing. Just knowing. And Ellie thought she couldn't speak, though her hands could barely close, tiny fingers brushing air that seemed to shimmer in the quiet. For the first 2 nights, I barely slept, not out of anxiety, out of awe. Sat in the rocker beside the crib and watched the two of them breathe, the baby's small chest rising in tandem with the slow rhythm of Echo's ribs. Like tides. In and out. Matching. Connected. Echo never left her post. Not to eat, not to stretch, not even when my sister came to take over the night shift. She would only rise when Ellie stirred, only eat when the baby has fallen asleep again. She had made the shift from the hospital corridor to Takoi, the home hallway, without hesitation. This was her new watch, the 3rd night. There was a storm. Heavy. The kind that throws branches at windows and shakes trees from their roots. My sister woke up first. She found me in the hallway, crouched beside the crib, flashlight in hand, checking the seals on the window. And Echo? She was already there, not scared, just a present. Sitting upright, ears forward, staring into the dark like she was daring the storm to try and come closer. When the wind grew louder, Ellie stirred, let out a small fretful sound. And before I could even touch her, Echo rose to her feet and pressed her side to the base of the crib. A steady wall of warmth and scent and breath. Ellie calmed, not instantly, but surely, like some piece of her already understood that this dog, this silent, scarred shadow, was safety itself. In the days that followed, the rhythm of our lives began to take shape. Diapers. Feeding. Breathing. Checks. Sleep. Repeat. And always Echo. My sister laughed. Once, when she saw Echo sitting in the doorway as I rocked Ellie to sleep, "She's more punctual than a nurse," she whispered. "She's older than one," I said, "and probably wiser." It became normal. This dog who didn't bark, this child who didn't speak. This house held their silence like a prayer. Neighbors asked questions. The mailman hesitated the first time Echo stood between him and the porch. Echo never growled, never lunged. She just watched. Always watched. As if the world was a place she had already survived and was now guarding this small corner of one. Afternoon. I stepped outside for air. Just a few minutes. Ellie had fallen asleep in the rocker on my sister's chest. Echo was lying beneath the window again, her head low, but when I opened the door and stepped onto the porch, she followed. Just to the step, just far enough to see me. And when I sat down on the bottom stair, she lowered herself beside me, her body curved against my leg like a tide rolling into shore. We sat like that for a while. Not speaking, not moving. And eventually, I asked the question I'd carried for weeks. Who were you waiting for? Echo didn't look at me, but her tail flicked once. A slow, final motion, like something inside her had heard the question 100 times already, and was finally beginning to answer it. That night, as I rocked Ellie to sleep, I thought about the first time I saw her. Not Ellie. Echo. In the rain. At the hospital entrance. Soaking wet, ribs visible. Eyes staring through glass as if someone she loved had just disappeared into the light and never come back. She hadn't just arrived there randomly. I know that now. She had followed someone. To that hospital. To that ward. To those NICU doors. And when that person never returned, she stayed. Not because she was lost, but because something else still needed her. Ellie. The next morning, my sister handed me an envelope. No return address, she said. Just left on the porch. I opened it. Inside was a photo. Black and white. Faded. A man in a hospital gown, smiling faintly. Beside him, a woman in a chair was tired but radiant. And at her feet a young German shepherd. Leaner. Cleaner. But unmistakably Echo. There was no note. No date, but I recognized the corridor behind them. The NICU. Same walls. Same window. Same floors every day for weeks. Echo had been there before, years ago. I sat with the photo for a long time, showed it to my sister. We didn't speak for nearly 10 minutes. Then she said, "That's why she stayed." I nodded. She lost someone there. And then found Ellie. She never really left. I placed the photo beside the crib that night. Didn't frame it, didn't explain it. Just let it exist beside the stuffed elephant, the folded towel, the things that made this space belong to both of them. Echo approached it slowly, sniffed it once, and lay down beside it. As if returning to something she'd buried in memory and now finally had permission to keep. She never looked at the photo again. Not directly, but Echo would pause at that spot beside the crib, where the black and white image sat tucked beneath the edge of the elephant's ear, and she would exhale. Long, slow, full, like someone breathing through memory. Like someone remembering a name they could no longer say. My sister asked once if we should try to find out more about the people in the picture, about the shepherd's past. There has to be a record, she said. If she was there, maybe someone loved her. Maybe someone is still looking. But I shook my head. She was loved, I said. That's all we need to know. And I believed it, because dogs don't stay where they aren't remembered. They don't guard places that mean nothing. Echo had returned for a reason, and she'd stayed for another. The baby was thriving. The doctors had moved her final appointment up, said she was hitting milestones, sleeping through the night, gaining weight. She'd learned to hold her head for longer now, lifting it just enough to track movement across a room, and her favorite thing to watch. Echo. She would follow her with those impossibly wide eyes every slow step, every rise from the floor, every quiet stretch and yawn. Ellie had come to expect her presence, not just as comfort, but as orientation. As if Echo was the axis around which her world rotated. One afternoon, I watched as Ellie reached out and managed for the first time to grip the edge of the blanket. Not much, just the corner, but it was enough. Enough to show strength. Enough to show choice. I looked to Echo, who was lying beside the crib, ears low, and I swear she was watching me. Not the child. Me. That night, I found myself standing at the front door again, staring out at the edge of the yard where the street curved gently to the left. The wind had picked up. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk in slow, scraping arcs. I remembered how I'd found her wet, thin, alone and how, even then, she hadn't looked lost. Just waiting. I felt something catch in my chest, the kind of tightness you feel before a goodbye. Not yet, but soon. Echo didn't sleep that night. She paced, not frantic. Measured. Once around the crib, once to the window. Back again, like she was checking perimeters only she could see, like she was preparing the space to be left. The next day, Ellie rolled over. Her first time unassisted. My sister called for me in a whisper. Half laughing, half crying, she did it. We stood over her, watching the small miracle play out. Ellie pushing her weight across one shoulder, fingers tightening into the edge of the blanket, eyes wide with the shock of her own movement. Echo stood too. She didn't come closer, didn't make a sound, just watched. And then lowered herself back down slowly, as if giving the child space to claim the moment fully. That night, we sat outside. Just me and Echo. The sky was unusually clear. No clouds, no wind. Just the kind of still air that makes sound feel louder, more real. I sat on the step. She lay at my feet, and I said it aloud. You came back for someone. She didn't move. I reached down, let my fingers rest in the thick ruff behind her neck. You didn't find them, did you? No sound. No change in breath. But you stayed, because someone else needed you. The stars above us were sharp that night. Cold, endless. And Echo finally looked up. Not at me. In the sky, like she was waiting for something to fall from it. My sister announced she'd be moving back home soon and wanted to be closer to our parents. Easier to get help with the baby, I understood. Ellie would have a room of her own, yard, cousins to play with, but I felt the air shift because Echo couldn't go. She wasn't mine to give, and somehow, we both knew this story had one more page left. The last week of summer passed in silence, the kind that carries weight. The kind you don't dare disturb with music or meaningless talk. We lived in motion. Feedings. Diaper changes. Naps. Walk around. The yard. Echo grew slower. Not sick. Not weak. Just finished, like a thread that had tied something together and was now beginning to ease its grip. I found her in the nursery one morning. Not beside the crib. Inside. Somehow, gently she had curled herself between the crib and the window wall. Her body folded small, her nose tucked beneath one paw. She didn't move when I stepped in, didn't look at me. Just stayed. I knelt beside her, ran a hand over the ridge of her spine. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't cold. She was resting, more deeply than I'd seen before. And Ellie? She was sleeping too, facing Echo, breathing in time. The day before my sister moved, we had a small gathering just for the family. Laughter, food, baby gifts wrapped in tissue paper. Pictures taken on the porch. Echo watched from the threshold, never stepped into the noise, but her tail tapped once, when Ellie was passed from arm to arm, and again when the baby made that now familiar soft sound in her throat, that not quite cry. That's knowing. And in every photo, if you looked closely, Echo was there. That evening, my sister sat beside me on the porch. Ellie asleep inside. The house is quiet. Echo on the step below. She's not just a dog, she said. No, I whispered. She never was. We didn't speak again for a long time, until the sun had nearly gone, until the sky was the color of fading memory. And then my sister asked, what happens when we leave? And I said, she know. We didn't tell Echo goodbye, not in so many words. She wouldn't have understood them, not the way we meant them. Not the way humans turn endings into something you can say aloud. She already knew. You could see it in the way she stopped waiting by the crib, the way she slept more during the day. The way she moves less when Ellie cries, not from disinterest, but from a kind of knowing. As if she was passing the roll on now, confident that the world would not break this child in her absence. The morning they left, I woke before dawn. My sister was already packing the car, moving quietly in the hallway, trying not to wake Ellie. There was still no music, no screens, no talk, only the faint creak of the front porch and the soft sound of boxes shifting in her trunk. Echo wasn't in her usual spot, not beside the crib, not near the door. I found her in the nursery one last time. Lying beneath the window, facing outwardly, breathing slowly, eyes half closed, not asleep. Not fully. Just listening. Ellie stirred, then woke, blinking slowly in the half-light. She didn't cry, just turned her head, until her gaze landed on the dog. And reached. One last time, I bent down and lifted her gently, pressing my cheek to her warm, soft hair. She smelled like lavender and morning. She looked at me, then back at Echo. And I let her hand fall low enough to brush the shepherd's ear. Touch so light I almost missed it. Echo didn't flinch. She just leaned in just slightly, as if committing the shape of Ellie's scent to memory. Not for safety, for farewell. We packed the rest in quiet. Ellie was buckled in. My sister kissed my cheek. We didn't say much. There are moments, too, full for words, and this was one of them. She closed the door. The car pulled away, and Echo didn't move, didn't chase, didn't bark. She stayed by the door. Then turned. And walked inside. Thought maybe she would search the crib, sniff the blankets, wait by the window, curl in the space where the child had once been. But she didn't. She walked to the center of the room, sat down and sighed. Not from grief, not from loss, from completion. It sounds like the end of a chapter. That evening, I laid the towel beside my bed, placed the elephant on top. Set her bowl down, half full. She didn't eat, didn't drink, just curled into the towel and fell asleep. So deeply I had to watch her chest to be sure she was still breathing. And I realized this was the first time in months she'd rested for herself, not for a child, not for a memory, but for the weight she no longer carried. In the days that followed, Echo changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly. She watched less, slept more, stopped pacing the windows. She let the world in a little at a time. Neighbors met her. The mailman stopped flinching. She began to walk beside me, not behind. Sometimes she even ran short bursts in the yard, her legs stiff but willing. Her body lightened, but she always returned to the towel. To the elephant, to that one quiet space where the child had once dreamed. And she would lie there still guarding something I couldn't see. A month passed, then another. Letters came. Photos. My sister sent videos of Ellie rolling, babbling, pulling herself toward a sippy cup like a girl, with something to prove. In each video, I looked at the space just behind the frame, the corner, the shadows, the background, expecting to see a dog. But Echo had not gone with her. She had finished her part, and she stayed. One night, I found Echo sitting in the doorway of the nursery, looking at the photo again, the one we'd never framed, still tucked beneath the edge of the crib. She didn't move when I entered, didn't turn her head. She just looked. At the man. At the woman. At the version of herself beside them. I knelt down, rested my hand on her back. I think they'd be proud, I whispered. She closed her eyes. And leaned into my touch. The first frost came early. She didn't like the cold. Her hips had grown stiff, and the old scar near her leg sometimes made her limp again. I bought a heated pad. Place it beneath the towel. She accepted it without protest. But each morning, she still walked with me. To the porch. To the edge of the sidewalk. And sometimes she'd stare down the street again. The same one where Ellie had first arrived home, like something inside her was remembering how far they had come. On a Wednesday nearly a year after the hospital, I found her in the nursery. Still. Quiet. Her breathing is soft, but her eyes were open, looking toward the crib. Empty, but made. Blanket folded. Elephant still propped in the corner. I sat beside her, didn't speak. I didn't have to. And for the first time in all those long months, Echo lifted her head and placed it in my lap. She didn't move. Again for hours, I stayed there, hand in her fur, The afternoon light falling through the window like memory itself. And I realized she had become the home we didn't know we needed. She had become the space where fear turned to breath. Where silence became safe. Where grief remembered love and stayed behind to honor it. That night, I lay in bed and listened to the quiet. No monitors. No beeping. No child stirring. Only the sound of her breath across the floor. Steady and calm, and I felt something close. Not vanish. Not disappear. Just gently close. Like the last page of a story read aloud in a room where someone you love has already fallen asleep.